Happy Tuesday, everyone. Hope you're doing really well. In today's show, we're going to be looking at Chelsea's transfer plans, incomings, outgoings, via a piece from Simon Johnson in The Athletic that I think has a lot of interesting detail. It has some names that we have heard consistently, other names that we haven't, and maybe distinguishing what is a realistic target for Chelsea in the transfer window, what is an unrealistic target, and of course the PSR conundrum that will come to a head at the end of this month as it did last year, June the 30th, whether Chelsea need to make sales. Will that accelerate some decisions that are unpopular? We'll go into that as well. If you are new around here, it really does help the show out if you give the video a like. If you're listening on the podcast feed, thank you for tuning in. Share the show around with fellow Chelsea fans so we can get a bigger community over the summer, because knowing Chelsea, we've got a new head coach in Enzo Maresca, and I wouldn't be surprised, no matter my thoughts on it, Chelsea usually are busy in the transfer window for better or worse. So unsurprising, we're starting to get an overlook of what Chelsea could be doing. What are they looking for in the transfer window? And Simon Johnson looking at the Chelsea transfer deal sheet, which the headline says centre-half and striker targeted amid the need for sales. And some of the names being mentioned here, as I say, if you're someone that has your ear to the ground over Chelsea transfer targets, over rumours or players that have been linked to the club, have been looked at in the past, I don't think any of these names should be a surprise to you. First up is RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko, who is a big target apparently this summer for Arsenal, who are on the lookout for a striker. Victor Osimhen has effectively been ruled out. It's cited here he doesn't suit Maresca's system, but his injury history, the amount it's going to take to get him out of Napoli. And I think firstly, I'd say this is a good thing, because I just don't think Osimhen is worth it really this summer, and that deal would cost so much. Is it really worth it when you could be addressing other areas? Apparently Brentford's Ivan Toney, who was linked to Chelsea earlier this season, is not fitting what they're looking for either. And even Brighton's Evan Ferguson, if you remember him, because he's kind of gone on the radar in terms of his form not being that good as the season progressed, because he was another one of these Brighton players that maybe Chelsea would overspend for. I think the wildest one within this is a 17-year-old fullback in Pedro Lima, who plays for Brazilian club Sport Recife. Just another classic example of Chelsea signing players they probably don't need to for the future, maybe for their multi-club model. I can't see that being a signing that's going to address the left-back issue, for instance, that's being discussed currently. And then I think we come to what I would deem some of the best business Chelsea could do this summer, apart from Tosun, who we spoke about yesterday in a defensive aspect, and that is the Crystal Palace duo of Michael Olise and Eze, of course, who are two players who've been lighting it up at Selhurst Park for a while now, but especially since Glasner came in, about February time. They've just been unleashed, right? And they had an incredible end to the season individually. So there's a lot of names there, and right at the end, Mads Hermansen from Leicester, who of course was Maresca's keeper, first choice keeper as the season went on at the King Power, is being talked about already, potentially. Chelsea already being touted as a club that are going to be looking for a new goalkeeper, with Burnley's James Trafford being linked. Now, that's a wild shout based on his performance level, based on the fact that throughout the course of last season, Vincent Kompany eventually went away from him in favour of Muric, I think it was, towards the end of the year. But you've got to factor in here that James Trafford was from Man City's academy. And of course, as we've seen from Chelsea's sporting director kind of think tank, they do like players they have previous working relationships with, or players that they know of from previous clubs they've worked at. So that's unsurprising. I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison between some of these targets based on current Chelsea players, just to give you a sense of, are they significant upgrades? Are they players that are really going to transform what Chelsea do? I think the first thing is Sesko, because obviously he's a name that's being talked about a lot at the moment. And I remember Sesko being linked to Chelsea when he's at Salzburg in the summer of 2022. He was one of those mad players that was, linked already, under the new ownership. And then we played against him for Salzburg in the Champions League, and then he was obviously bought by another Red Bull club in Leipzig. They do that pretty consistently, and his trajectory has continued, of course, rather than just at Salzburg. So matched him up with Nicholas Jackson using Wyscout. In terms of goals last season, Sesko's a bit better, 22 to his name. He's also better for goals per 90, 0.74 compared to Nicholas Jackson, 0.73. Non-penalty goals, Nicholas Jackson has 17, Sesko has 20. Non-penalty goals per 90, again, Sesko is a bit better. In terms of XG, we've got Nicholas Jackson way out in front here. Head goals, pretty level, 4 for Jackson, 5 for Sesko. In terms of shots, Jackson's way ahead, but their actual shots per 90 isn't that different. And in terms of shots per target, we do have Sesko a little bit higher. And in terms of some other metrics I looked at, Sesko is performing at a higher level currently. It's not a huge gap. It's not a gap, but I think, again, when I talked about Osimhen, when I looked at some of those numbers at the end of the season, again, for me, it's not substantially different to make me feel but like this is like a major upgrade. I think in some ways you can look at it and go, he is a highly rated striker, he is developing, but then you could make arguments about Jackson in that fashion. If you're going to buy a striker, I actually would prefer someone in an older age, which again is not something this ownership likes to do for a variety of reasons, which I think is self-defeating, because I just would like someone to be maybe a alternative to Jackson. Doesn't have to be the same profile, but someone who could just, as I say, offer that little bit of wisdom as the season goes on, and I think that would help Maresca, but doesn't seem like at the moment that name is cropping up, and they're not even seemingly going close to Ivan Toney. In terms of the goalkeeper, which I think is obviously another key position at the other end of the pitch, just comparing Hermansen and Petrovic last season, their ability to prevent goals, there is a huge disparity. It's kind of the biggest disparity I saw, especially just looking at this here. Prevented goals, 6.91 for Hermansen. It's actually a negative for Petrovic, and of course it's higher for prevented goals per 90. Hermansen did play accurate long passes a little bit better, 57%. I always do think you have to factor in here that there are so many variables when we look at player comparisons, and I always say this, and it kind of gets a bit tedious to say it every time we talk about a player comparison, but you have to factor in where they're playing, who they're playing for, what is the style of football. I think the good thing in a way, or the easier thing, more simple thing about looking at players that have played under Maresca very recently is that just looking at kind of general numbers, you can kind of see what's required of a goalkeeper. And I was listening to Rob Tanner, who was on the Sidelines Town Hall, Athletic Leicester correspondent, and he was talking about, how important the goalkeeper is, especially in terms of even a third centre-back. If you think of the goalkeeper in possession as kind of a third centre-back at times, in terms of build-up and how much that player is required to be on the ball, to start moves, to be comfortable receiving it, and maybe at times pressurised areas. Which is why there have been chatter in recent days about Sanchez coming back into the fray. Are there better options out there? Again, I think if you're going to be spending in this market, for me, you have to be significantly upgrading what we have. In the goalkeeper sense, I want to see someone come in who really is going to, command that number one position. And of course, that requires spending quite a bit of money, which, might not be that realistic for Chelsea, despite the finances they do have, because of course PSR. And that's where we get to the other side of this, which Simon Johnson broke down in terms of who's going. Looking at Trevor Chalobah and Armando Broja, could raise in excess of 50 million between them. Suggestions are that Chelsea are going to settle for around 20 to 25 million for Broja. Monaco, AC Milan, and a number of Premier League clubs are there for him. I think Armando Broja, for me, makes sense for him to make a move away now. Yes, I think he does actually provide a different option than Nicholas Jackson. I mean, there are similarities between both. They are players who do possess speed. I think Broja, though, feels more like a direct forward, someone who I think maybe is a little bit more adjusted, and you could play a little bit more direct to him. But at the same time, I think Broja has stalled a bit in his career. He needs to get first team football. And if you're looking at homegrown players that you are going to sell that aren't kind of integral to your first team, Broja is obviously up there compared to Chalobah and Gallagher, who we don't want to sell. So I think for Broja's own career, it's probably the best time for him to move on. It's, of course, what Chelsea do with their attack that, it is a bigger question. We know Ian Maatsen and Lewis Hall are likely going to be off. Ian Maatsen, there's kind of a hope that Dortmund will budge on that kind of 35 million release clause. There's some money there too. Amari Hutchinson, Alex Matos are being mentioned here because, of course, they had decent loans in the Championship last year. I think it'd be a real shame to see Amari Hutchinson leave permanently after the season he's just had. because it was so good and I think it was so promising, and it was the type of loan move that was so rare last season for Chelsea. We spent a lot of the year talking about failed loans. It proved why the Championship can be such a good ground for our young players to go, as we've seen in recent years. And I think there's a real talent there. And it's almost like maybe Murray Hutchinson, because he was bought so long ago and he was bought even pre the current sporting directors, maybe they don't sort of see him as their guy. But it's like, for me, Hutchinson's a real talented player. Is there even, I wouldn't mind him coming into the first team squad, because you've got to factor in Chelsea have more football next season. They have the Conference League. And I think that Hutchinson should at least be staying around pre-season, especially if you're going to sell him for only like 20 million. For me, no, I'd like to see him in the first team, how he could develop, and maybe another loan. But then it does, factor in, is the player now in a position of his career where he goes, well, do you believe in me or do you not believe in me? And that's always a position when you have such a clutter in one area of the pitch, which Chelsea undeniably do. And I think maybe Matos will come to a similar conclusion, even though, he's just kind of got into senior football. That was kind of his first loan away, wasn't it, last season. The club apparently are also looking at some old names. Hakim Ziyech, obviously, bought by Galatasaray. Lukaku has 2 years left on his contract, which is earning him around 340 grand a week, which is the highest at Stamford Bridge. And Chelsea would value the 31-year-old at 38 million. Kepa also being mentioned here. Malang Sarr, both have just 1 year left on their deals. And of course, as was already mentioned, Lewis Hall, 28 million Chelsea going to get from that move to Newcastle United. I know Matt Law brought this point up several months ago. I believe I talked about it as well. I think when you look at all this, it kind of does show you that Chelsea have a route to get funds beyond just Conor Gallagher and Trevor Chalobah, which is why, again, I think the argument for selling those two players falls down. Yes, you can look at the fact that probably those two players have the highest interest, but that doesn't mean you let them go because they have the highest interest. The reason they have the highest interest is because they are clearly highly valuable to your first team. And I think losing one would be really disappointing. So there is enough names there that could make up decent money. I guess the big problem and has been the curiosity of all of us for several months now is, what is the PSR situation? All the reports, I guess the club briefing is that, no, listen, we're absolutely fine. But, I think it'd be foolish of all of us to just take their word at face value here. And it's kind of hard to know how significant the problem is. I think there will be sales made. It may not be as drastic as some people have suggested. I guess we will find out in the coming weeks. But just because PSR is looming for Chelsea, I will stick to this no matter what happens in the upcoming weeks. There should be no excuse over what is about to happen as if Chelsea had no control over PSR. It is not a natural weather phenomenon. It is not something they could not have anticipated. It's not some kind of freakish event. Chelsea spent a lot of money. They knew what the repercussions of spending that money. We were in this boat 12 months ago, and Chelsea still spent quite a bit of money over the summer. So again, I don't want to hear these kind of really pathetic excuses that the club has nothing to do, can't do anything. What were they supposed to do? And sell just really good players like when they didn't need to, who have come through their academy. No, like it's a position they've put themselves in, and I think that's something to clarify. The final thing is, obviously Enzo is now officially appointed, and we're starting to get these kind of profile pieces about him. And it's funny because I do feel like I'm slightly in Groundhog Day. You do generally around head coaches coming in as a Chelsea fan because it happens so frequently. But I remember this time, I think it was this time last year or around the similar time, I was also talking about like early pieces from like the likes of Matt Law and others about Pochettino and his training methods. And so we're back here again speaking about Enzo Maresca. I think Matt Law, I'll link it down below in the description and show notes. He gave a piece mainly talking about the potentially strict nutrition compared to like the running players are going to do, which was obviously a big part of Poch. But apparently Maresca is expected to provide every Chelsea player with online software to analyse tactical information remotely, which will help players returning late to get up to speed. In one sense, is this ridiculous? No, like we live in an online world. I use online data, like Y-Scout I use regularly, as do professionals in the game. So it'd be silly of me to sit here and sneer at it. I think like a lot of people, like, if you're not someone that's really into like advanced metrics, scouting, data, tactical analysis. And there are some people who kind of go completely opposite way and just completely rubbish stats, which I think is a little bit reductive. Like, stats are important. Analyzing performance, I think, is important, and professional clubs do it at the highest level. But again, my kind of more cynical side looks at this and kind of fears about, the over kind of complication of football, and this fear that I do have of Chelsea again becoming a very robotic side. But again, we've got many weeks now before we do get to the start of pre-season. I would just be on the lookout for this, because we hear it so often about new coaches, and it does feel like a little bit of a cycle, a little bit of a Black Mirror episode, where I don't personally take this with a pinch of salt, because it's like every time a football club gets a new head coach in, you kind of find that the briefing around them is talking about the opposite of what the previous guy did, like positive negatives, basically. Like, if there was someone more relaxed in training, the players have been amazed by the level of tactical insight and information. And then by the end of that coach's time and the new guy comes in, it's the opposite. They were overwhelmed by the tactical information, like it was too restrictive for them. So in times it does feel like we're living the same day over and over again, like Bill Murray. So there we go. Those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours as ever in the comments below. Your thoughts ahead of this transfer window. What do you want to see? What, in terms of incomings, outgoings, let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you again very soon. All the best.